Hello, Assalamualaikum dear viewers. In my previous video, I had dealt with Anglo-Saxon period. Alternatively, this period is subtitled as Old English period. Today, I am going to cover Anglo-Norman period. First, let's have the introduction of the Norman. The Norman actually from Scandinavia, they first occupied the northern part of France and established a kingdom named Normandy. There, they started living in agreement with the local people. They were, in fact, Vikings. Earlier, they were heathen and a barbarous tribe, but within a century, they changed themselves tremendously when they established kingdom in the overseas part of their country. In fact, when they established kingdom in France, there they followed some proper strategies. They adopted and accepted local culture, thus intermarrying happened, and ultimately acculturation happened there. Their coming in England brought some historical events. In fact, in 1066, Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king, refilled the Viking heterada from the territory of England. But immediately, Harold Godwinson was attacked by William the Great, Norman king, and he was that time ruler of Normandy kingdom inside France. Thus, very comfortably, William the Conqueror defeated the last Anglo-Saxon king, Harold Godwinson. And after the defeat of Harold Godwinson in England, Anglo-Norman rule was started, and that rule was continued to 1340. As these kings, in fact, William the Great and his successive kings, they were from northern part of France, from Normandy. They were called Norsemen, and in revised form, they were called Norman. Norman rule in England had some radical effects on the lifestyle and on the total lifestyle of the English people, as well as the inter effect of both the ruling and ruled class people. Now, the characteristic of Anglo-Norman period in England: new settlement, and undoubtedly new settlement of the Norman people in England. Then influence of the French, as the Norman people, they earlier accepted French culture. When they occupied England, they imported those culture in England, and thus there was tremendous influence of French culture in England. Alongside cultural impact, there was also massive wave of Christianity, because Christianity spread in England. We know the Norman were heathen, unreligious, in fact, but gradually they got civilized. It's quite a surprising thing for the Norman, because from the most uncivilized tribe, they turned into a most civilized tribe within a century. Then there was Crusade War, and in regard of education, London became the center of education because the two great universities, Oxford and Cambridge, were established during Anglo-Norman period in England. And finally, in that time, in Anglo-Norman period, literature was written based on history and legend. And now in this phase, we would know political and social history of Anglo-Norman period. After the conquest, William the Great became the feudal king of whole England. William the Conqueror accepted the earls of Mercia and Northumbria because these two earls, Edwin and Morcar, they did not fight against William the Conqueror in the Battle of Hastings in one. After getting settled in the Kingdom of England, William the Conqueror transferred land ownership from nobles to the barons. Furthermore, the king owned all the lands but gave some portion to the barons, and in return, the barons protect the king from any external attack. In addition, the baron also gave some portion of land to the knights and trained the knights for war, and the baron and knights, they engaged villains, in fact farmers, for cultivation. And at the end of a cultivation season, they were paid. In fact, the barons and knights were paid tax or some portion of their crops. But if failed to pay the tax or a portion of crops in a definite time, then the villains had to pay penalty. And now, language development. Here we got the development of English language because there was establishment of Roman kingdom for nearly 400 years, and accent from the overseas tribes as well as accent of the local or indigenous people. So when all those accents got juxtaposed, a new language was born, and that language was called English. But in the Anglo-Norman period, we got acculturation of French and English. And this acculturation developed English language further, and it led to modern English language. The fusion of English and French contributed immensely for further development of English language for modernity. And during Anglo-Norman period, French became the official language. In fact, French became the language of elite class people. On the other hand, English was spoken by the lower class people. But as it is known, the Anglo-Norman are very adaptable. They gradually accepted the culture of the local people. Thus, acculturation happened, and acculturation led for English language into modern form. In this phase, we would know the cultural history of Anglo-Norman period. There were a lot of incidents, cultural incidents during that period. The events were Crusade War, exposure of knowledge from the East, church-based practice of knowledge, establishment of universities, in fact, Oxford and Cambridge. London became the center of education after the establishment of two great universities in 1167 and 1209 by Henry I and II. And now we would know about Crusade War. Crusade wars, a series of war against Islamic rule, in fact, against Ottoman Empire. They created, supported, and sometimes directed by Roman Latin Church between the year 1095 to 1291. Anglo-Saxon kings, William the Conqueror, who ruled in England 1066 to 1087, then William II Rufus, who ruled England from 1087 to 1100, then Henry I Beauclerk from 1100 to 1135, then Stephen of Blois from 1135 to 1154, after then Henry II from 1154 to onward, and then Henry III and the rest of the kings. So here the literary characteristics of Anglo-Norman period. Word order became uniform, phonemes were formed, standardization of spellings, 3 cycles of poems, matter of Britain, matter of France, and matter of Rome. Because the Anglo-Norman, they emphasized on local culture, custom, history, and legend. Writer of that period wrote about the 3 great kingdoms in England. Themes of those poems were love, courtly love, adventure, heroism in war, and passionate. Writers of Anglo-Norman period. William of Newbury, who wrote Historia Regum Anglicarum, it's a Latin work. Henry of Huntington wrote Historia Anglorum, and the Latin work. Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote Historia Regum Britannia. West wrote Bruce, and finally Lyman wrote Brut. And finally, important Anglo-Norman works. Chanson de Geste means songs of deeds. The Owl and the Nightingale, Culture Mundi, containing the theme Christianity, and Crini Riole, another great work of Anglo-Norman period. Thus, today's video ends. Thank you, viewers.